Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast with your hosts, Mike Walters and Eddie Jones. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Jones, and we have a good show for you this week. We've been gone for a little bit, but a little bit of news came up. Francois Beauchemin is going to return to the Ducks, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the impact, some of the poll questions that you guys voted on and your reactions and questions about that. We're going to discuss the World Juniors a little bit, some of the upcoming events. For those of you who are missing out on hockey, obviously the Fedorin Cup is coming up around the corner. The Prospect Showcase is coming up in September with the Ducks playing in San Jose. So we'll talk about some of those and a couple other news items around the league. Not a whole lot happening, Eddie, but in terms of the Ducks, they did make a signing. It had been quiet for a long time, and Francois Beauchemin's back. And what's your initial reaction, Eddie? It's kind of interesting seeing what the fans thought about this.
Yeah, and it seems like it's more of a depth move. Obviously, he's not going to be a key part to this team like he was in the past with the Ducks. But I think with Vatanen possibly being out for 3 months to start the season, and the uncertainty surrounding Lindholm, and if he's going to be ready to start the season, it's more of a depth role, and we saw the comments from Beauchemin too saying he wants to return somewhere familiar. It's probably going to be his last season, so for him not to have to move somewhere where he's never been before and come back to Anaheim, I think is important for him. And I don't want to say it's a courtesy to a former player that they're going to bring him back and let him retire as a Duck. I think part of that plays a role. Obviously, like I mentioned, the Ducks do need some depth defensemen to start the season, but it's kind of a mix of both of those two things, I think.
Yeah, and you talk about a mix of that, it's kind of a mix of reactions as well. Some people are a little upset, as far as the deal that was made. It's a $1 million contract with $500,000 in performance bonuses. Not really a big hit on the cap. According to Cap Friendly, the Ducks have a little bit over $3 million left. We threw out a couple of poll questions. We did one on Twitter to see, whether or not people were happy he came back or not. And about 80% of you were happy that he was back. Obviously, some of you were not happy. It was funny. The ones that weren't were really not happy, it seemed like. But that was the poll question on Twitter. And then as you touched on, as far as why did the Ducks sign him? And that's what, some people are asking is what is the exact reason for bringing him back? We put another poll question in our article that kind of gave you three scenarios or three situations. We talked about the insurance policy, as you mentioned, with Lindholm and Vatanen, obviously having their shoulder surgeries. We also talked about a potential trade and possibly it being both of those. So most of you voted that you thought it would be both, a little over 50%. 38% about said insurance policy and 10% thought maybe a trade. So looking at that, Eddie, what you talked about, I agree with you. I think it's more insurance policy. If you look at the Ducks, top blue line players right now, you have Lindholm, Fowler, Manson, Montour, Bieksa, Beauchemin, and Holzer. So if you're looking at that, and as we said, that one or two may be out, Vatanen and maybe Lindholm. I think it's more just to fill in as a depth role there. Could he be traded later on midseason? Maybe, but he wants to do this as his last season. He wants to retire as a Duck. So I think that's more of the possibility. The Ducks could trade somebody else, but Eddie, I don't see Beauchemin getting moved.
No, I don't see him getting moved either. And really, I find it hard for them to move anybody else because they brought in Beauchemin. It's not like he's a like-for-like replacement for anybody that they would be moving. Like we talked about before, them possibly moving Vatanen, obviously before the injury. And obviously before all that, it was about Fowler and talks about him getting moved at the beginning of last season. But I don't see them moving any of them now. I think it's a little bit too late. Obviously now, Vatanen was the most likely guy to get moved, and with, the issues with his injury and his recovery time, I don't think a lot of teams are willing to wait 3 months into the season to get a player when the Ducks would be getting back an impactful player to start the season. So I don't see that happening anymore. Obviously Beauchemin comes in. He's not going to do a lot. He's not, he's 37 now, so he's not going to make a huge impact. He's going to be a steady presence on the blue line, but he doesn't do a lot of things right anymore. You know, he did play on a bad Colorado team last year, but you know, he's essentially, we've brought in another Kevin Bieksa in terms of performance and what he's going to bring on the ice. So it's nothing to get super excited about. Obviously, everybody loves the guy and what he's done for us in the past. So I think in that aspect, it's nice to have him back.
Yeah, you know, and we got a lot of fan questions, obviously, about this, and you kind of touched on it. And one of them was from Ringo. He asked, you know, what is it going to mean for the team defensively? You know, I think the impact here is kind of going to depend on the health of the players in the beginning. You know, it's another question we had that was asked too, is who would you pair Beauchemin with? So, you know, I think if Lindholm's good to go, Eddie, you most likely see Lindholm and Manson together. We've seen those two, you know, paired together. Yeah, Fowler and Montour, maybe they go together. You also have Holzer in the mix. But, you know, sadly, the pairing may be Bieksa and Beauchemin, Eddie, which I know a lot of fans aren't going to be happy about that if that's the case.
Yeah, you know, normally with the Ducks, we don't really see them pair two right-handed guys together. So I think inevitably we're going to see Beauchemin and Bieksa get paired together. Like you said, Manson usually gets paired with Lindholm. There's a chance he might also get paired with Fowler, depending how they want to go there. And, you know, I find it hard for them to bury Montour down in the lineup and kind of anchor him with Francois Beauchemin. So I think he either plays with Fowler or Lindholm, depending on where Manson goes. And really that leaves us with Beauchemin and Bieksa, and obviously Holzer as well if they decide to switch in and out. But you know, I think to start the season, there's a good chance you do end up seeing Beauchemin and Bieksa play together, and I really hope that D pair is out there for a max of 5 minutes a game. I can't see it being too impactful when they're on the ice together. So I'm hoping they switch it up, and you know, obviously, hopefully, Lindholm is ready to go at the beginning of the season, and you know, if Vatanen's recovery time is less than expected, that would be beneficial as well, so we don't have to see them paired together for too long.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think as far as the Ducks defense, there is a little bit of concern to start the season. And, you know, we did talk about that before because of the injuries to Lindholm and Vatanen. And now you bring in Beauchemin that, like you said, you know, is an older player, a little bit slower, making more, you know, mistakes. I mean, obviously he was on Colorado. You got to take that into account too, on a team that obviously wasn't doing well. But I think that is the concern for the Ducks, is having, you know, a top, you know, solid six D pairings, you know, that are going to start. And they're not going to have that. I mean, you're not going to have Vatanen, and we don't know if we're going to have Lindholm. So obviously, there's still a little bit of time to go before the season starts, and we haven't really heard a whole lot about either one of the players, what's going on. We knew the last thing on Lindholm is that his recovery was going well, so that was good news. But in terms of defense, Eddie, that's kind of my concern with this team. To start the season, it'll be interesting to see what the pairings are, and like you said, if it is indeed Bieksa and Beauchemin, how much time will they get in a 60-minute game?
Yeah, and I think that's the question right now. Is really, I mean, I don't expect them to get too much if they're paired together, and maybe you do see. I mean, we've seen Montour get anchored with Bieksa, with Stoner, with Holzer in the past, and you know, there's a chance that they might do that again, just to split up the skill across different D pairings. So at least you have one guy who can make a difference on each pairing. So you'd have obviously the top one, which would be Lindholm and Manson. You'd have Fowler possibly with Bieksa, and then you'd have Beauchemin with Montour. And at least you have, you know, Lindholm on one, Fowler on the other, Montour on the other. Three guys who can make a difference and drive play forward. So there's a chance they can go with that. Obviously, we have to wait and see, and it all depends on if Lindholm's ready, like I said, or even if Vatanen is ready, or depending on when he's going to come back. And you know, one question that we'll get to eventually though is will Larson be ready, and will he be able to make an impact, and will Magna be able to come up and make an impact, and will he steal a spot from Beauchemin or from Holzer? So there's a lot of questions going into. Obviously, it'll go into training camp, and we'll see if those guys are actually even able to make the lineup, and then from there, I think it'll make things a little bit clearer.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we touched upon that too. You know, as far as in the article about Beauchemin and what's going to happen with the team. There's also Steven Oleski that the Ducks signed too, which we knew he wasn't going to be like a top pairing, but he could have been one of those bottom guys, to fill in like between him and Holzer. And now it really depends on what's going to happen. Like you said, Magna and Larson, they could jump up. Oleski would go down, to the goals and stay there most likely now that Beauchemin's brought in. So there's a lot of little, moving parts here on the defense. Is something that it's going to be, kind of up in the air to start the season. But in terms of depth, I think that it's good. that the Ducks overall brought in Beauchemin. Obviously, he's a fan favorite. They brought him in at a cheap price. I think it's going to be a lot of good help in the beginning. One thing is I don't anticipate him playing a lot the whole season. The other part of this too, and this was talked about by Murray when the signing was done, is that he brings in that leadership too, Eddie. Because you look at the Ducks defense, other than Bieksa, most of the defensive players on this team are very, very young. So the other aspect of this that a lot of people I don't think are taking into account is that he's going to be a good mentor, whether he's a healthy scratch or he's on that bottom pairing. And I think that's what the Ducks are looking for because, he won the Stanley Cup with the Ducks. This is his third tour of duty. His body obviously isn't going to be, up to speed like all these young guys, but he does know the ins and outs of the game pretty well. And I think he'll be a good, mentor for these young guys.
Yeah, I think that's obviously important. We've had BX and that was kind of the point to bring in Bieksa was to have a veteran guy like that and a leader for this blue line back when they were even younger than they are now. I think we're getting to the point, though I saw this, a couple of people said this on Twitter the other day after the Beauchemin signing was, we're getting to the point where guys like Fowler and Vatanen are getting into their late 20s, and we're going to start looking to them to be leaders in the locker room. And obviously Beauchemin is only signed for one more year. Bieksa's contract's up at the end of the year as well, and I think this is a good segue for them to move into Fowler and Vatanen to be the leaders on this blue line. Fowler's going to be 26 next year. Vatanen's going to be 27, and it's time for these guys to take over that role as leaders on the blue line and lead the way for Montour and for Lindholm and for Larson when he comes up and Magna. So I think it's great for this season, and obviously it's a familiar face for a lot of guys in the locker room for Beauchemin to come back, and I think that's great for when you're going into the playoffs and stuff as well. So I think it's going to be important in that aspect.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. Fowler coming up and Vatanen, obviously. I think you're right. They are the ones that are going to, obviously if Vatanen doesn't get traded, which we heard all that stuff going on, and that's kind of died down. But they're going to be the newer leaders of this defensive core. So I think that is a key. And like you said, as a segue for Beauchemin to come in, will be good. Maybe the Ducks make the push and go all the way, and get them one cup on the way out, which would be nice. I mean, obviously a little early, but that's kind of what we're looking for. And another concern too, kind of switching to the other part of the team here is the offense, and we had Laura ask about that too. A lot of people still are wondering, will the Ducks make another move? Will they go get another forward? In the article talking about Beauchemin, talked about some of these other forwards that are out there, Eddie. Yager is still out there. We're at the end of August and he's floating out there. There's the Pasternak situation, which hasn't been resolved. Bennett situation hasn't been resolved. Stafford's still floating out there, another name that we had talked about. What do you think, as far as the Ducks trying to get another forward? All these players, these forwards that, they're still, out there.
Yeah, no, I think there's a chance. We haven't really heard much on Yager in a while. We haven't heard much on Joe McGinley, and Stafford is a guy that, a lot of teams would love to have, and he's still out there, which is surprising to me. I think there's a chance the Ducks could sign some of these guys. I think it's a little late now. I think they might be happy with the group that they're going in with, but they still do have $3 million in cap space to work with. And if you want to go in and sign a guy like Drew Stafford to a 1 year, $1.5, $2 million contract, I think they have the room to do that. And I think that improves them going into the season. And there's still plenty of time, and it's a possibility for at least for those unrestricted free agents. But for the restricted free agents you mentioned, I think it's a little bit more difficult. Obviously, the big story of the last week was the rumors that Pasternak was looking for a trade because Boston wasn't able to really work out a contract with him. Obviously, there's still talks are still ongoing, but with Draisaitl getting 8.5, it was rumored that Pasternak was looking for around the same. Would the Ducks be able to trade for him? I don't think so. I don't think they have the assets to really work around a trade like that. Normally you would say maybe Vatanen, but with him being out for the first 3 months of the season, possibly, I don't think that really works out. And the Ducks obviously aren't interested in moving a guy like Montour, Lindholm, or even Raquel or anybody like that. So I don't see a trade like that. And, for Bennett, there hasn't been a ton of news on his contract coming out. Obviously, at the end of the season, there was rumors that they might be deciding to move him and move on from him. But I think the Calgary organization still believes that this is a guy that eventually will hit his stride and prove that why they took him at fourth overall in the draft. So I think there's a lot of options left out there. Are the Ducks going to get anybody? I don't think so. But they might be able to take a chance on a guy like Yager or a guy like Stafford on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at right now too. I mean, obviously we saw him go out and get Beauchemin for the 1-year, $1 million deal, and we didn't think the Ducks were going to do a whole lot, and that's still not a big move, obviously, but it's a move. And I think you're right. I think in terms of trying to work out something with a restricted free agent trade kind of a thing, that's going to be tough. Like you said, with Lindholm and Vatanin's situation and their health, that kind of puts a damper on any of those kind of things. I think the Ducks are happy with the way that the defense is right now. Obviously, just bringing in Beauchemin as the backup. In terms of the forwards, I think you're right. I think they would try to go out and maybe get a Yager for 1 year, or maybe they get a Ginla, which would be hilarious because you remember Beauchemin and Ginla had that monster fight, some years back. So that would be kind of hilarious if they both ended their careers with 1 year on the Ducks at the end. That would be kind of ironic, as we've seen them tussle before. But I think in this coming next month or so, again, I don't see them doing too much, like we said, a month ago. But I would think that one of those guys, is what they would try and do if they wanted to go get someone. I think, like you said, maybe a 1-year deal for $1 to $2 million is what we look at. Because if you look at the Ducks' top 9, Eddie, I mean, it's a pretty solid group. The Ducks obviously brought back Eves, who's most likely going to play with Getzlaf. And then we talked about whether or not it would be, Perry or Casse on that top line. You still have the Kessler line with Cogliano and Silverberg. Obviously Richie, and of course Raquel. I mean, it's a pretty solid top 9 group. Vermette as well. I mean, you've got a good base there. I mean, obviously the Ducks' fourth line rotates in and out with the players there, but I mean, I think everybody's pretty happy with what we got. I mean, if we were able to throw in one more for a cheap deal, that would work. But I think what we have right now, barring any kind of injuries or anything else, I think it's pretty good for the top 9 forwards.
Yeah, and I think they really do want to give Richie a chance to prove himself. I think they do want to give Kasha a chance to prove himself as well. And if you bring in a guy like Stafford, you do end up burying those guys farther down the lineup. And I do think Richie took a step forward last year, and obviously Kasha came out of nowhere and played very well for the Ducks. So, it looks like from what we saw, obviously the lack of signings up front, it looks like that's what they're going to do, and they're going to either play Richie with Getzlaf and Eves, or they're going to try playing Kasha with Getzlaf and Eves, or they're going to form a third line around those guys with Vermette. Whatever they're going to do, it looks like they want to keep these guys around the top 9 and give them some more chances. And honestly, I'm okay with that. Bringing in a guy like Stafford, like Hoodler, some of those, I think it would be possibly an improvement, but we don't know how well Nick Ritchie's going to do this year. We don't know how well Cash is going to do this year. They could take a huge step forward and be more impactful than a possible signing like Stafford would have been. So it'll be interesting to see where they fit in the lineup and how well they do this year, because their success, it really is the key to the bottom part of the Ducks lineup getting going.
Yeah, I agree with you. If you're sitting at home and you're going, hey, Mike and Eddie, what one or two forwards should I watch that are currently on the team now this season, and how they're going to affect this team? And I think you're right. I think the biggest two are going to be Richie and Casse and how they perform. I mean, some of the things Casse did last season were awesome, and he may have a great season. Like you said, Richie is starting to develop more as well. Of course, you're still going to look to, Kessler, Getzlaf and Perry, the big 3, of course, to do their things. But as far as in terms of other players to watch, and how they develop and how it's going to affect the team, I think you're right, because the secondary scoring is going to be huge for this team. If this team's going to go on deep in the playoffs again, that's going to be key. I mean, I think they're going to be fine during the regular season. You and I have talked about this as far as, even with the Vegas Knights coming in, which, that team, I don't think they're going to do too well. They kind of had a good draft, but then they kind of messed some things up a little bit in there. I still think we'll see the Ducks at the top of the Pacific. If they're first, who cares? You and I have talked about this. Being first in the Pacific hasn't meant much. But if they're 1, 2, or 3, I'm fine with that. And I think if they can get that secondary scoring, then there's a good chance to go far in the playoffs.
Yeah, and really was one of the issues last year is we were getting a lot of scoring from Getzlaw, or like obviously later on in the season Perry picked it up a bit. Kessler started off very strong. Silverberg started off strong. Raquel had a great season. Eves came in and did great. But other than that, Vermette was he was okay. Richie took a step forward, but still wasn't great. Kasha came in and was unexpected, so I think it was a great season for him in that aspect. But there wasn't much scoring coming from the bottom pairing, and obviously the Ducks made a big push, but a lot of people were expecting us to bring in that top six winger this year and make a difference and be able to to completely change the way the Ducks offense looked, and we didn't get that, and obviously it's unfortunate, but we kept the D pairings together. You lost Theodore to keep a hold of guys like Raquel and Silverberg. So, it's going to have to be a new look for this bottom pairing, I think, this year, at least for the third and fourth line. We've got to get new guys like Rasmussen's coming, and you still got some guys like Vermette's going to be there. Jared Boll's going to be there. Chris Wagner's going to be there, and the possibility of maybe a guy like Max Jones, if he makes the lineup out of Camp or Sam Steele, I think that's exciting as well, and that could really add a whole new dynamic to the Ducks offense. So there's a lot of questions that kind of have to wait until training camp and to see if any of these guys make the lineup or what the lineup's even going to look like.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, obviously, if you're out there right now, you're missing out on hockey. Of course, maybe you're watching some baseball or something, or football's coming up. But in terms of hockey, we did have the World Junior Summer Showcase. If you followed some of that, Jones and Steele played in that. Badini also played. Mahura also played in those games that we had, recently, and then we're going to get a chance to see them play in December again, Eddie. And then also, there's a good chance you'll see Jones and Steele in September 9th through the 12th. They're going to have the Ducks Prospect Showcase, which they'll be in San Jose. I'll actually be up there that weekend. I may or may not go to one of the games. One of my friends is actually getting married up in the area there. So I'm going to try to swing by there, but, I'm obviously going to be a little bit busy that weekend. But if you get a chance, you can check it out then. And you may see, because the Ducks are always going to play San Jose, and Colorado's going to be part of that too. So there's a little bit of hockey coming up, Eddie. And that's probably where we'll get to watch these guys and maybe see if they make a push. Like you said, if you try to bring in a Yager or a Stafford or something like that, you kind of slow down the process of some of these younger players and some of the ones that, you're going to get to watch here coming up in September.
Yeah, you slow down the development of a guy like Richard Catch, like we talked about, and then, Jones has made some strides in the offseason and seems like he's fired up to hopefully make a spot, or at least play a couple games at the beginning of the season to show he belongs. And Steele's an interesting one because I'm not 100% sure if he's ready or not. I'm not sold on, obviously the skill is there, but I don't know if that's going to factor in against his size. We've obviously seen a guy like Mitch Marner come in last year with the Leafs and light it up, and there was people were saying, oh, is he ready? Is he too small for the NHL? Does he need to go in the AHL? And he came up and put up over 60 points last year. And I'm not saying Steele's going to come in and do the same, or that he's even the same type of player as Mitch Marner, but there's a chance for him to succeed in this lineup, and there's a lot of spaces available. There's top line wing spots available with Getzlaff and Eves, so. And there's a center and wing spots available with Raquel and Perry in the top 9. So I think there's a good chance for him to succeed along some of those guys. So it'll be interesting to see. I really would like to see at least one of them get a little bit of a tryout at the beginning of the season and see how they do. If not, they can go back to junior, and I think both of them will be even closer to being NHL ready next year.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, Murray's take on both of these guys. Obviously Jones has the size. Murray said that his decision making sometimes is questionable, and then you look at Steele. Steele has the hockey IQ, but he doesn't have the size. So you've got a little of this and a little of that of both. Obviously, you never know. I mean, you look at certain players, like you look at Paul Kariya. He didn't have a lot of size, but he did great. So size doesn't always matter. But hockey IQ is also a factor too. So, but part of that too is being young. Obviously, when players are going through the progression right now, that's when they're developing the decision making, and they're learning and gaining experience. So those are the two to keep an eye on as far as whether or not they can crack the lineup. At least for some of the games, as Eddie had mentioned, as far as getting a full-time deal this year, I don't see that happening, obviously, but they could push it and, come into training camp and at least, see some of that. I mean, unless there's some injuries, barring, hopefully that doesn't happen. But I think, like you said, Eddie, those are the two to watch. And if either one of them can, bust it out, it may make things a little bit interesting for the Ducks offensive lineup.
Yeah, and I think one guy I completely forgot it, but I feel bad about it, but we haven't mentioned yet is Nick Cardillis as well. I mean, he came up and had a cameo at the end of the season, played a couple playoff games as well, and I mean, he's a guy that could come up and make a difference this year as well. He's a guy that we've been waiting to see for a long time now, and he finally came up and made appearances last year, and I think there's a chance that he could have a bigger role this year as well, and have a spot in the top 9, and there's a good chance that he could be a guy who takes a step forward this year and makes a difference, gets 30, 40 points for the Ducks, depending on what type of role he plays in. But I think that's another guy you have to look at as being, another reason that the Ducks aren't looking to bring in a guy like Drew Stafford or Yuri Hoodler or even Yager, and the fact that they kind of want to give these minutes to a younger guy like Cardillis and like Richie and Kasha and possibly Jones or Steele.
You make a good point. And for those of you, too, that want to see Nick Cardillis play, he's actually going to be at the Fedorin Cup coming up this weekend on Saturday. If you haven't gone, it's a fun event. It raises, money for charity. And Phil Hewitt will be there. He's the master of ceremonies, as he always is. There'll be giveaways and different prizes and things that you can bid on. Tickets are still available. Andrew Cogliano will be there. Sean Pronger will be there. Todd Marchant. And then, like I said, Nick Cardillis will be there. The full roster hasn't been announced, at least at the time of recording this podcast. But if you get a chance to go to that, you can also, see some hockey for those of you that are starved, missing out on your NHL hockey action. So that's coming up on Saturday the 26th, and that's going to be at Anaheim Ice. One other little bit of news too, Eddie, Ducks related, is the Hockey Hall of Fame. We know that Korea and Solani were named to it, but they're also going to play in the Legends Classic game coming up. That's going to be in November 12th, and it's going to be in your neighborhood. It's going to be at the Air Canada Center, so that's something to look at too. Down the road, another a fun thing to see. I mean, getting to see Korea and Solani together on ice again for the first time in years. That's another exciting thing that's coming up in a couple months.
Yeah, unfortunately, we won't get to see them playing on the same team. I believe it's Canada versus the world, so Solani will be on one side and Korea will be on the other side. But yeah, I mean, it's great to see those guys. I think we were talking about this beforehand, but you said Messier was a captain of one team and Yari Curry's a captain of the other team. So there's a bunch of legends going to be at that tournament. Something I didn't even know about, so I got to look into that and might go to that now because that looks like it's going to be a fun event. But yeah, I mean, it'd be great to see Korea on the ice, and even though he's not playing on the same team as Solani, to see them on the ice together would be great to see again. And hopefully, we saw the cameo from Korea in the playoffs last season. Hopefully, we get to see more of him now in this upcoming season, especially obviously with the Hockey Hall of Fame induction and everything like that. It would be great to see him play a bigger role with the Ducks this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people have talked about it, especially when we saw him crossing off the 9, during the playoffs. We'll kind of go to some of the fan questions. I know we kind of addressed some throughout the show already, but we had some, more interesting ones on here. The Ducks they put out their promotional giveaways that are coming up this season. We'll post that on the website. But if you hadn't seen it, there's a whole bunch of things on there, and we had some fans ask, what were we looking forward to? I know one of them on there, Eddie, I was looking forward to is they're going to have a camo night, which that's always good because, getting camo-themed sports stuff is difficult. They have some other ones on here, trading cards. Let's see what else. They have a reusable grocery bag, a backpack. But I think the best one and the one that most people are going to be interested, Eddie, there's not a photo of it, but it's going to be a Patrick Eaves beard.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the one everybody's most excited for. That'll be funny to watch, obviously from in the arena and from outside on TV, and watching everybody wearing these fake Patrick Eaves beards. If that's what it ends up being, I think that'll be great to see. it'll be a funny thing. It'll be great, and obviously Eaves will be in on it. And it'll be a fun night. But yeah, like you said, all the ones you mentioned, they seem like they're going to be fun to be a part of.
And kind of one thing, too, we didn't really mention earlier in the show, but we talked about, all these players and if the Ducks are going to get someone else. And, another reason why they might not get someone else is because of Patrick Eaves. I mean, they saw the chemistry he had with Getzlaf. They signed him for a couple years. He had a really good season last year. I mean, we don't know if we have the exact same season. But that's another reason too, Eddie, that the Ducks may just shy away from trying to get one of these other named players. Have Eves in the lineup with Getzlaf and let one of the younger guys try and step up.
Yeah, and really, I honestly hope Eves can come in and do similar to what he did last year. I mean, it was a great season for him last year. It was kind of an anomaly for him. It's something we haven't seen from him in his career, and rarely do you see a guy come out at 33 and put up a career year and continue it from there. But I think him playing with Getzlaf, the chemistry he had, I think he can continue that. A lot of people contributed his success last year to playing on the power play in Dallas with Seguin and Ben and playing with Getzlaf on the Ducks. But if he's not going anywhere, he's not playing with anybody else this season. He's going to be playing with Getzlaf for most of the season, at least we expect so. And I don't see why he can't get maybe 20 goals again this season. And if he gets that, I mean, that's what we brought him in for. And if he can help spark the power play and contribute like he did in the playoffs last year again, so I think it'll be exciting to see how he does. Obviously that with chemistry and pairing with Getzlaf is going to be key to the Ducks offense this year, along with Perry getting going and Gibson staying healthy. I think those are three of the big keys to success for the Ducks coming up this season.
Yeah, I agree with you on all those. I think those are the other things to watch as the season starts to progress and unfold. Another interesting question that we had is from Brandon. He asked, what songs do you want to hear during the Ducks warm-ups? So, Phil Hu and I always talk about this, and it's always heavy metal themed, Eddie. We usually talk about, Metallica or Iron Maiden, Megadeth, stuff like that. Something to pump up everybody in the beginning. That's kind of what I look for, but you have any choices there? Anything you want to hear, in the beginning of the warm-ups? I know you're not, there obviously,
yeah.
but
because
you're
this
way
question
away.
Applies to me. I'm not in the arena, so
Yeah.
this is more of a question for people at the game. So
Yeah. So it's just another funny question that somebody threw out there, and then one other thing I did want to mention too. I don't know if everybody caught this, but I went on the Fourth Line podcast a couple weeks ago, I think it was, and they were trying to determine Carl, who's on the show. There's Mike and Carl on there. Carl was trying to pick up his bandwagon team, Eddie, and tried to entice him to pick the Ducks. That was one of his final choices. I even offered up a Patrick Eaves jersey, and they still went no, and they ended up going with Carolina. So, good luck to them on that one with Carolina. The guys over at Section 328 have their own podcast too. It's another one that I recommend, both of those, the Fourth Line and Section 328. But I don't know how Carolina's going to do, Eddie. They think they're going to make the playoffs, but I don't know. I told Carl that he should have joined our team, but oh well. I mean, even the jersey didn't work.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if he wanted some possibility at success this season, he should have went with us. But I guess he's going for the long run and looking to the future to go with Carolina, and obviously the guys at Section 328 probably offered him a little bit more than a jersey if he's going to go with Carolina and suffer through this season and possibly next season. But I don't know. I don't know what he sees. Maybe they make the playoffs this year and surprise everybody, and he picked the right team. But we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, it was fun. So if you guys are missing out on some podcast action, check out both of those. They have theirs up there posted as well. I guess the only really other thing to talk about, Eddie, that kind of happened, and unfortunately it's a sad note to end on, but it's a good note in sense of the contributions that this man made. Bryan Murray passed away recently, which was unfortunate. And if you look back at his career, though, he did a lot of good things for the Ducks. If you remember, he led the Ducks to the first Stanley Cup back in 2003. He brought in Getzlaf and Perry as well. So a lot of what's going on with Anaheim today, Eddie, we owe to that man. And obviously, thoughts and prayers go out to him, his family and friends.
Yeah, it was, it's disappointing and sad to see, him gone so early. And like you said, all the stuff that he's done for the Ducks and the stuff that he's done for the Senators as well. I mean, he's really built them to the team that they've become and the success that they had in the last few seasons as well. So it's sad to see. And obviously, condolences go out to his family and obviously with Bob Murray and everybody like that as well. So it's sad to see, and really, we're hoping that he would be along or be around a lot longer. But we got to look back and look at the stuff he's done for this team, the stuff that he's done, not just in hockey, and really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're gonna, dedicate this podcast to him and his memory and everything that he's done. Like you said, not just for the Ducks, for hockey in general, but obviously he made some, big contributions for this franchise as well. With that, we're gonna, wrap up the show. Check out the other podcasts as I mentioned. Don't forget the Fedorin Cup's coming up this the weekend, and we put out some of the schedule, some of the other events here, which we'll put in the article as well in case you forgot the dates or you want to try to attend one of these things. So we'll put out some of the information there as well. And if you get a chance to check out our hockey store at tpnhockey.com, there's still shirts and things going on there as well. So with that, we hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back, who knows, in another week or two, just depending on kind of what happens. Obviously, it's been a slow summer, but once the season gets going, we'll be back, pretty much every week. Thanks for listening, and let's go Ducks.